We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Somewhere a perversion has taken place. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government, and freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. The martyrs of history were not fools, and our honored dead who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance.
I entered this world 3 days before Christmas in 1973. I had somewhat of a normal upbringing in a small town near Toronto, Canada. I went to public school in the 1980s, and I eventually left high school out of boredom at age 16. At this time, the Cold War had just ended, and Desert Storm, the first Gulf War, was just getting underway. Even at such a young age, I somehow knew that what I was being taught at school was not exactly the whole truth. Upon leaving school, I immediately applied for a social insurance number and joined the workforce. Being young and full of energy, I took any job that managed to fall into my lap, such as a short order cook, a carnival ride operator, and even front office work at a recording studio, where, at age 19, I was witnessing up-and-coming Canadian rock bands signing multi-million-dollar recording contracts. As with everyone else, society incorrectly instilled in me at a very early age that earning money was apparently the entire meaning of human life on this planet. Money represented everything of importance to my human existence, including my food, my clothing, my housing, and yes, even my ability to attract girlfriends. So, if money was at the core of my existence and provided for the basics to sustain human life in a humanitarian-based nation such as Canada, it made me question why then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney introduced GST, a 7% federal sales tax on every good and service that I paid for. This was on top of the 8% provincial sales tax and 22% income tax that I was already paying, and it amounted to a grand total of 37% taxation on my right to human life. But after the 1991 recession that was apparently brought on by the Gulf War, life went on for me. And I just had to get used to the idea of accepting a lower standard of living in a country that is unbelievably rich in natural resources. Fast forward 10 years and several job changes later, as with most people, my life was changed forever by the horrific events of September 11, 2001. While attempting to get ready for work that day, I watched the buildings fall on live TV. Even at the time, I felt that something was off. But I went to work that day, and by the time I came home, Bush was on TV supplying us with the official narrative. Fast forward 7 years, 4 maxed out credit cards, and 2 divorces later, in October 2008, a coworker emailed me a Google video link to a documentary film by a man named Alex Jones. This film was called Terror Storm, a history of government-sponsored terrorism. That night, I sat down at my computer with a six-pack of beer and an open mind, and I watched the whole thing. This film blew my mind, as I just could not get out of my head the possibility of having been lied to about 9/11. Having watched and been inspired by Alex's films, in 2009 I began creating my own films by using other people's YouTube videos and compiling them into an understandable and educational experience, detailing the events of 9/11 and the New World Order as a whole. From that moment on, the word truth replaced the word money as the core of my human existence. And the word freedom became my ultimate goal. So why am I telling you all of this? Because without truth, you can never have freedom. After nearly 5 years of persistent research into the truth of the New World Order and the systems of law which govern it, I now have a more complete picture, which I would like to share with you. The New World Order is not at all what I originally thought it was when I embarked on my journey of truth and freedom in 2008. The real truth of the matter is that every town, every city, every region, every county, and every municipality in North America is in fact a municipal corporation, chartered by a state or province since about the mid-1800s. A municipal corporation is defined in law as a city, town, or other local political entity, a public corporation formed by charter from the state and having the autonomous authority to administer the state's local affairs. The municipal corporation that has legal operating authority over the land that I live upon is called the Corporation of the City of Toronto, and it was incorporated in 1834. Every state and every province in North America is also a corporation, chartered by their respected countries. Now here is where things get very deceptive.
What we have to look at is the President is the Chief Executive Officer of this corporation called the United States of America.
What did you just say?
The President is the Chief Executive Officer of this corporation called the United States of America.
Near the end of World War II, the United Nations was created in 1945, with one of its main intentions being to secure a governing body that could legally issue charters of incorporation to all 193 countries now operating under the UN Charter, and to be able to regulate these nation-state corporations via the authoritarian financial control of the IMF. The process of nation-state incorporation has been long and drawn out, slowly transpiring over the last 50 years. For example, Canada did not officially become its own corporate entity until the 17th of April 1982. At this point, the Constitution Act was amended and transformed into a corporate charter, adding to it the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a document of incorporation that only applies to employees of this new corporate government. In fact, if you look up Canada on the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission website, you will find it there, listed as a company. This company lists income tax payments as a stream of revenue. Ever since 2008, the entire premeditated plan of the ongoing European Union financial collapse has been to bankrupt the nations of Europe, forcing them to sign on to the IMF's bailout packages, and thereby transforming them all into corporations in one foul swoop. Daniel Estulin, author of The True Story of the Bilderberg Group, was 100% correct when he entitled his 2010 address to the European Parliament Towards One World Company Limited. The ultimate plan of the New World Order's think tanks, such as Bilderberg Group, is to turn everything on this planet, including you, into a profit-making corporation, governed by the rules and bylaws of business. one vast and ecumenical holding company, for whom all men will work to serve a common profit, as Ned Beatty's character promoted in the 1976 film Network. In 1965, David Rockefeller addressed the International Industrial Conference, where he boldly stated, "We have entered upon an era in which interdisciplinary cooperation on a worldwide basis must be the cornerstone of accomplishment. Each of us has the duty to fashion his own contribution to fit the grand design of a global community." For many of us, the marketplace of tomorrow will be no less than this whole planet of Earth. What we do will manifest itself in ways that we cannot foretell, and it will have an unforeseen impact on individual lives and whole societies. What we are is God's gift to man. What we become is man's gift to God. The very moment one gets over the shock of realizing that countries are now merely corporations, trading the natural resources of the planet, you then also come to the realization of one other very important concept. Corporations have absolutely no control or authority over any human being without their consent.
Government of the people and by the people sets a single standard for all who would hold power. You must maintain your power through consent, not coercion.
Consent is defined as agreement, approval, or permission as to some act or purpose given voluntarily by a competent person. Since the created can never be greater than the creator, the elite knew that they could not give corporations all of the legal rights of human beings. So, they had to devise a scheme by which, over time, they could achieve parity by reducing our human rights down to the level of the legal rights of a corporation. For hundreds of years, human beings have been represented in law by the legal status known as a person. In 1888, however, the Supreme Court ruled that the word person, as it appears in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, includes corporations. Within a few short years, law dictionaries had redefined the word person, splitting it into two subcategories: natural person and artificial person. A natural person is defined in law as a human being who has the legal capacity for rights and duties. An artificial person is defined in law as an entity, such as a corporation, created by law and given certain legal rights and duties of a human being. A being, real or imaginary, who, for the purpose of legal reasoning, is treated more or less as a human being. An artificial person is always identified in law by its legal name, written entirely in block capital letters. Shortly after the Great Depression and President Roosevelt's 1933 New Deal, state governments began issuing birth certificates with the name of the registered child in block capital letters. This process didn't commence in Canada until the 1960s. The birth certificate is the founding document from which all other forms of government-issued ID are created. By issuing the birth certificate in the all-capitalized legal name of the artificial person, the elite have achieved their goal of reducing our human rights down to the level of the legal rights of a corporation. Everything you apply for using the birth certificate as the founding document also displays the artificial all-caps name. Documents such as your passport, driver's license, vehicle registration, social security card, bank accounts, credit cards, court documents, tax documents, and even school registration. They all apply only to the artificial person and not to you, the natural person. The only reason why any of these documents and accounts apply to you is because somewhere along the line, you have given your consent to represent the artificial person. Therefore, you are now receiving any benefits associated with that name, but you are also responsible for any liabilities that name incurs. In this system they have created, the liabilities of the artificial person's name will always outweigh the benefits you may receive, because it is a rigged game, completely designed to control and enslave you. Soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, secured by their pledges. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debts to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. Colonel Edward Mandell House. The truth is, you, as a human being, are not obligated in any way, shape, or form to register your children with or to any corporate government entity. The word registrant is legally defined as a person who registers something for the purpose of securing a right or privilege granted by law upon official registration. When your parents registered your birth, they weren't registering you per se. Shortly after your birth, the hospital took a mandatory blood sample. That blood sample contains your DNA, which is considered under law to be your biological property.
So what if I told you the government has your baby's DNA? Newborns are routinely screened for a series of genetic diseases, and in some states, that DNA is stored even without your consent.
While in the hospital, the baby's heel will be pricked and 5 drops of blood are collected. A couple weeks later, another 5 drops of blood are taken at the pediatrician's office and sent to the state. Now, the newborn screening process only used 1 or 2 of the spots. So what happens to the remaining samples? Well, the state keeps them.
I didn't know that. I think a lot of parents know that our kids get tested for certain genetic diseases, but we don't necessarily know that that DNA is kept in a state lab with our child's name attached.
Upon registration with the government, a trust was created in the name of your artificial person. This trust contains not only that DNA sample, but also your share of any profits made from the government's raping and pillaging of the natural resources of the country. A trust is a legally binding contract between the grantor, your parents, and the trustee, the government, in order to provide the benefits and security to you, the beneficiary. Whenever a trust is created, the title to any property listed in that trust is split. The government was granted the legal title to your DNA, while your parents maintain the equitable title. Legal title refers to the duties and responsibilities of maintaining and controlling some property. Equitable title refers to the benefits and enjoyment of that property.
Some states keep that DNA indefinitely. It'll be there forever.
Don't you have to ask permission, though, to do this?
They passed a new law that allows the state to keep and use the samples for research, but requires parents to be notified and allows parents to request that their child's blood spots be destroyed. But it's not as simple as checking off a box when the samples are taken. Parents must fill out this special form. Then the state has 60 days to destroy the leftover blood spots.
But in other states, there is no such form. You can try writing a letter, but I've talked to several experts on there, and they're kind of like, good luck. I mean, you can write the letter, but the state doesn't have to listen to you. They can just keep storing it.
Now holding the legal title, the government has the responsibility and legal duty to maintain and control the child's DNA. The parents merely have the legal right to the enjoyment of the child that houses that DNA and the benefits of government financial assistance, such as welfare, subsidized housing, and health care. Since the government has the legal duty to maintain and control the child, if you, as the grantor to the trust, fail to take care of their property, the government has the legal right to remove that property from your possession. The same process is true whether you register your child, your vehicle, your firearms, and even your pets. The act of registration creates a trust and transfers the legal title of any property named in that trust to the government. Now here's the catch. The equitable title to your DNA that your parents once held was automatically transferred to you on your 18th birthday. However, the government maintains the legal title over your DNA and thus over you through the artificial person until the day you die, or until you demand in writing to dissolve this trust agreement and take full and legal possession of both halves of the title. Again, the simple fact is, you, as a human being, are not obligated in any way, shape, or form to register your children or your private property to any corporate government entity. Your artificial person does have an obligated legal duty to register under statute. However, as I've discovered, legal duties can be discharged simply by denial of consent in writing. Just the same as registration, the act of applying for a license from a corporate government entity is also detrimental to your human freedom. The word license is legally defined as a permission, usually revocable, to commit some act that would otherwise be completely lawful to do outside of that licensing framework. Otherwise, that licensing authority would be guilty of fraud for charging money to permit unlawful acts. When you submit, it legally means you are agreeing to bend to the will of another. When you apply, it legally means you are begging for something. So, when you submit an application for a license, it literally means you are begging the government for permission, and you are agreeing to bend to their will in order to get that permission. When you ask for permission to do something that is already lawful, that makes you a child in the eyes of the law. Only children beg for permission to engage in an activity that an adult can do without permission. Specifically, when you apply for a driver's license and put your signature to this contract, you then bind yourself to all of the rules of this contract. This means the moment you receive your license, you are now legally required under statute to register your motor vehicle to the corporate government entity, which then creates a trust, authorizing them to transfer the legal title of that vehicle in order to allow them to be able to tow and impound your car at your own financial expense. Again, the liabilities far outweigh the benefits. If you learned how to properly operate your father's truck on his farmland and never actually applied for a driver's license, then you would not be subject to any statute requiring you to register your vehicle to the government. A common misconception is that law is all-encompassing and that we must obey every law on the books at all times. Nothing is further from the truth. Law is comprised of several different components, many of which only apply to you when you are engaged in an activity for which you contracted with the government in order to gain their permission. These types of laws are not actually laws at all. They are statutes. The word statute has been interpreted to mean a legislative rule of society, which has been given the force of law by the consent of the governed. In plain English, this means that statutes have no lawful force or effect on any human being without your consent. Statutes are very easy to spot because they will always have the word act right in the title, such as the Patriot Act. The easiest way to differentiate between a statute and a law is to always remember that a true law exists only to protect the public and can never compel a free human being to pay or perform. Statutes always compel you to either pay or perform, and sometimes both. Because statutes need your consent in order to give them the force of law, many of them involve a contract, such as a license or a permit. In order to act upon a human being using a statute that has no underlying contract bearing your signature, the police must see your government-issued ID before they act. The simple act of producing your ID for the police to bear witness not only verifies to them the existence of a person who is subject to the statute, but also constitutes the consent needed in order to give that statute the force of law. Remember, the all-capitalized name on your government-issued ID is not you. It is an artificial person that you are falsely identifying with. When police press charges against you, they are actually charging the assumed name of the artificial person, which you have consented to represent. When you show up in court, if you do not immediately correct the assumption of that fictional name, the court will proceed under the presumption that you are in fact that artificial person, and they will grant you all of the rights that artificial persons are entitled to. What this means is, you have just consented to being stripped of your human rights in that courtroom. Many statutory laws also have statutory courts, which are usually separate from criminal courts of law. Have you ever wondered why there are tax courts, traffic courts, and family courts? Tax, traffic, and family courts only deal with matters pertaining to those contracts that you have entered into with the government. When dealing with these three types of courts, the name on the originating contract is the all-capitalized name of the artificial person. Therefore, the court will not allow you to rebut this name, as in these courts, the validity of that name is no longer an assumption, but rather it is considered to be an established fact. There is no such thing as human rights in these courts, and as such, you have no constitutional right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Artificial persons do not have a soul or a conscience, and something that does not have a soul or a conscience cannot possibly have innocence. As I mentioned before, I applied for a social insurance number when I was 16, because, like everyone else, I was told that I needed this number in order to work legally in Canada. However, what I have come to understand is that the word "for" is closer to the truth. Given that Canada became a corporation in 1982, it would be more accurate to state that I needed this number in order to work legally for Canada. If you are working legally in Walmart, are you not also working legally for Walmart? The deception of this number is achieved through your ignorance of the type of contract that you are working under. It may sound harsh to say this, but their deception can't work without your ignorance. If you are working under your artificial person's number, it is called a contract of service. This is a three-way contract between you, the government, and your employer, which works on the same principles as a temporary job placement agency. They place you into a job, and for this service, you must give them a portion of your wages. The same is true when working under this number. The alternative to a contract of service is called a contract for hire. This is a legally written two-way private contract between you and your employer, which eliminates the middleman and excludes third-party interlopers from making any claims over the terms or benefits of this contract. This type of contract is what I have worked under for many years now, and as a result, I have not paid a single penny in income tax, as my artificial person is not a party to this contract, nor is the government. As you are beginning to see, The system the elite have created is actually one of two systems running simultaneously side by side. The names of these two systems are listed on the face of every denomination of American paper currency. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. The public system is governed by commercial law and encompasses everything that you do in society while acting as the representative for your artificial person. Everything from banking to driving, from paying property tax to going to school, from voting in elections to working under your Social Security card. The public system is designed by the elite, and it exists because they consider you to be a child who needs protection from others, as well as protection from yourself. Don't get me wrong, there are many benefits to operating within the public system. However, as I said before, the liabilities far outweigh the benefits. The other side of the coin is the private system. This system is for adults and operates under natural law, which is governed by morality and mutual respect for basic human rights. Nowadays, it is primarily used for private transactions. What the elite don't want you to know is that nearly everything that your artificial person can do in the public system, you, as a human being, have the lawful right to do in the private system. You can earn a tax-free living. You can travel in your unregistered car without begging for permission. You can get married in the eyes of your creator without needing a license. You can homeschool your unregistered children. And you can live a life free of all of the bureaucratic nuisances of a de facto corporate government.
In recent decades, worldwide social change has experienced unprecedented historical acceleration, particularly because instant mass communications, such as radio, television, and the internet, cumulatively have been stimulating a universal awakening of mass political consciousness. Persistent and highly motivated populist resistance of politically awakened and historically resentful peoples to external control has proven to be increasingly difficult to suppress.
In the last 5 years, I have grown by leaps and bounds. I am no longer a child in the eyes of the law, and as a result, I no longer fear any civil servant, including the ones with guns. More importantly, I have learned to govern myself rather than allowing my artificial person to govern me, and as such, I am more spiritually and mentally prepared to peacefully resist the One World Company Limited, using research, education, and knowledge as my weapons of choice. If you truly desire to be free and are willing to put the effort into educating yourself, it will happen. All journeys begin with just one step, and the first step on this journey is letting go of the fear. This is the fundamental truth that my many years of research have taught me. We are governed by consent, and we are policed by consent. I hereby withdraw my consent. This is the fundamental human freedom that awaits all of us. You just have to want it bad enough to do something about it.
Our republic's wealth and everything it is and all of its challenges has now been teamed up, pulling the globalist system of enslavement and war and death. We are now in bondage to pure evil. Our energies and everything our ancestors built is now slave to this evil. And we must break the chains of slavery. We must break them now. We must declare liberty. So I say it to you now. We are all Paul Revere. And we're not just fighting for freedom in North America. This is 1776 worldwide.